Supposed to be somewhere. Crap. You have to wear the mic. Don't be one of those, right? The mic is working. Want to look good for the camera, so I get it all straightened out there. All right, 402, that's good enough. Wow, thank you. Such a beautiful day. It's been such a long day, and you came out. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. I know the effort that it required. I will try to make this energizing and exciting and keep you awake for most of it. My name is John Mayer. I'm the executive director of Cali, and my talk today is about A2J Author, a new version of A2J Author, actually. But I'll, for the purposes of those who don't know what A2J Author is, I'll do a very quick intro. How many of you do not know what A2J Author is? A couple of you. Good. Excellent. All right. I will say that this tremendous amount of work that I will display and talk about is mostly the product of the brilliant man sitting over there looking at his white Mac who doesn't want to be called out, Sam Goshorn. Without Sam, there's nothing here. This is Sam's masterpiece. And we wouldn't be successfully getting it out to law schools and getting them without the lovely and able help of Jessica Bullock, who works for the Center for Access to Justice and Technology at Chicago-Kent. So glad to have a couple of my colleagues in the room. So I started to write an agenda for this, and it got too damn long. I don't know that I'm going to cover all of that stuff, but it gives me sort of a track to go on. Before, in the beginning, there was heaven and earth. And it began with a report done in 2000, a project to study why people who go to court have trouble, represent themselves. Access to justice, meeting the needs of the self-represented litigants. There's a project with Chicago-Kent and the Institute of Design. There's a bunch of design students paired up with law students to go observe self-represented litigants who deal with the court system, and they visited 6 or 7 courts around the country, came up with hundreds of ideas, consolidated them down to the best couple of dozen, and produced this report. It's free on the internet somewhere. On the Kent website. On the Kent website as well. I participated in that and was part of the team that said, well, we could take some of these ideas and turn them into a piece of software that can solve some of these problems. And that's where A2J Author came from. A2J Author is just a graphical user interface. It's specifically designed for low-income and self-represented litigants. So if you just stop for a moment and look at this, here's a web page. And it looks different than every other, or at least it's intended to look different than other web pages because there's lots of white space. There's not a lot of ads. There's not a lot of busy, boxy sort of things going on there, right? It's got a person there who's looking out at you with a little thought bubble saying, welcome. And basically, the software asks you one question at a time. and you walk your way up this path, answering those questions, branching depending on the questions, until you get to justice, which is that courthouse way in the back. That's just a quick tour of some of the design choices that came out of this effort. But I wanted to point out that it wasn't just something that popped out of somebody's head. It was there was a huge team of people and an effort to just get to the point where we came up with the design and then the coding that would happen. So A2J Author is used by legal aid organizations, mostly lawyers, to automate court forms or legal processes so that self-represented litigants can handle them themselves. There's a huge justice gap in the US. Half of the people who are eligible to get free legal aid can't get it because there aren't enough legal aid attorneys. Half of the people. So the door opens at 8 o'clock, 100 people line up, the first 50 get in, 5 o'clock the door shuts, and the last 50 go away. They don't get served the next day or the next day or the next day. Obviously, a lot of them just sort of give up, or they run to the internet to try to solve the problems for themselves. So the goal for A2J Author was maybe we can do something for those people for at least initially for simple legal processes, right? So it has some just-in-time learning features, little pop-ups that may show a map or a graphic. You can insert YouTube videos if that's appropriate. We as in Cali don't write these guided interviews, right? I should maybe explain a guided interview. How many of you have ever used a TurboTax or a Tax Slayer or something like that to do your taxes? It's got a lot of similarities to that, all right? It's got a lot of similarities, one question at a time, make it simple. In the background, the data is being collected, it's being stuck into memory, it's being exported as an XML file, and that XML file gets married up with a document assembly tool, typically HotDocs, which then generates the document and brings it back to the person. So it might be a letter, a form, a list, a report, a pleading, or something like that. All right? Now, it's a fairly versatile tool, and so people have started to use it for other things besides simple filling out of forms, right? Including online intake. Intake for legal aid organizations is relatively complicated. You have to ask a lot of questions about your jurisdiction, where you live, about how much money you make, and whether you qualify. And usually, or a lot of times, that's being done by a lawyer, and that takes a half hour before at the end they find out, no, you're not qualified, I'm sorry. And you have an angry person who has to leave because for some reason or another they're not qualified. And the lawyer has spent a half hour doing effectively no productive work in that situation. Well, an increasing number of states are creating online intake where the person can do the data entry themselves and answer the questions, and at that point maybe find out that they don't qualify, and maybe then they could be redirected off to a website where it says, well, we can't help you, but maybe this website can help you help yourself. All right? It's being used for triage, which is, I like to think of it as a reference interview, a series of questions and answers that might lead you to other resources. And we've got at least one or so four pilot projects where it's being used for e-filing. So the data that comes in doesn't end up being handed to a document assembly tool. It ends up inside of a court management system directly. It's just data, right? People have used it for benefits calculators, standalone info guides. And we have an entire website where we do training, record those trainings. This is mostly Jessica's bailiwick, and make these available for the legal aid folks that do this. So I'm going to skip right to the statistics and say, so how many dozens of people have you helped, John, with those millions of tax dollars that you've wasted? The answer is about 2 million so far. There's about 800 automated forms out there that were run a total of 2 million times to produce something over 1 million different documents. Remember, it's not necessarily a failure if the people don't get through to the end and get a form. It might be a success if they find out that they need to go off and get information from some other place. So this is what we call this is what I would like to call a good start. But you can see we're already starting to bump up against something. In other words, our hockey stick is starting to curve over. All right? And the problem is, when we wrote A2J author the first time, it was 2000 and, well, that report was in 2000. We had the first working version in 2004, 10 years ago. It was written in Flash. It's a Windows-based program. And today, people have these silly little things called Apples, iPads, and iPhones that don't run Flash. And because it's a Windows program, the authoring program is a Windows program. Students who have Macs or people or lawyers who have Macs can't create new guided interviews with them. Problem, right? Also, because it doesn't work on an iPhone, we don't have it doesn't work in mobile situations. So our goal was to so we got a grant a couple of years ago to rewrite A2J author from version 4 to version 5 entirely in JavaScript and HTML5 so that it could be run on a website. It will be a web-based application development environment that then could be used by people who have Macintoshes and would solve a lot of these problems, and wouldn't use Flash either. Obviously, that means it runs in the cloud, and part of the grant is to do a mobile version of the viewer. So that same thing that you see on that you saw on a desktop screen, you would see on an iPhone or on an Android. I'll show you some of the designs that we've got for that if I can get to it. And we recently got a grant, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. We recently got a grant also to build in some basic document assembly capabilities. How many of you know anything about document assembly? All right, so what do you know about? What software? Hot Docs? Is that pretty much it? Yeah. So Hot Docs is pretty powerful stuff, and we're not claiming that we can replace it. But here's the problem. The people who have to automate a form have to learn how to use A2J author, and they have to learn how to use Hot Docs, because you have to automate the guided interview that walks the person through the form, and then you have to automate the form so that when they get married together, you get the form is the assembled product of that. All right. So if you could just build some document assembly capability in A2J, then you can eliminate the Hot Docs part. First thing. Second thing, Hot Docs is Windows only as well. There is no Mac version. There isn't going to be a Mac version. They are moving to the cloud themselves, but not in the authoring sense. Third, Hot Docs is a commercial product and costs money, whereas the people we work with, because of our grant, get to use A2J for free. So, we want to simplify things and make that graph keep climbing. Not just 2 million in 5 years. We'd like to see 2 million a month. I'd like to see 10 million a month, for all the possible things that people can do. So A2J Author 5 has, these are the avatars from the old one, and these are the avatars from the new one. Of course, you got to make it look a little more 3D and stuff like that. There's the people there. So we have avatars that represent the guide who walks you through it, and we have avatars for the person who is being represented, as walking down that path. I got that there just as a placeholder in case I didn't have a good web connection, but that's the current version. Let's call it beta 1 of the authoring thing. Now, I don't have enough time to give you like a sort of a full run through demo, but I'll show you a few things to give you the flavor of that. So a guided interview is broken up into steps, and the steps are broken up into questions, right? And so here's all the steps. I pulled up a relatively complicated interview. New York Surrogate Small Estate Settlement. It has 8 steps in it? Yeah. And it has a couple of hundred questions in it. So I can pop open the very first question, which is the introduction. And at this point, it gets sort of obvious. Basically, we built a tool that's a bunch of fill in the blanks. Because our goal here is for authors as lawyers who are not programmers to be able to do this. Right? So they fill in the blanks, saying, putting in, maybe attaching images, putting in the text of the questions, deciding how what the wording of it is. They don't control any of the presentation of the information, just the content of that information. And underneath it all is just XML that we're creating and storing as we go along for I don't know how technical some of you folks are or want to get into that side of it. But by separating the content from the presentation makes it easier in the future for us to build other viewers, like the mobile viewer, that can just access that XML. Do you see what I'm saying? They're not wedded to each other, the software and the format. So I'll show you what that looks like on to the user. Oh, let me blow that down a little bit. You know, there's that same question, New York Surrogate Court. I haven't gone past the next question. Oh, great. Yeah, it's looking for a list of states to fill in there. You know, let's just type some crap in there. Let's choose a male avatar. Let's hope this works. It does work. Very good. Thank you, Sam. A little bit about how to use this program. Here's a learn more that would pop up with some information. You know, and now I'm into answering a whole bunch of questions. Yeah, this is asking for a county, and I think I'm stuck here because it's got to require. Oh no, there we go. Yeah, I'm stuck there. I didn't pick a very good demo example, perhaps. So this is now not a Flash box. This is an HTML web page. You know, and so this sort of thing can run on a tablet. Whereas our other version, and I've got our other version up here. You know, here's A2J 4. This is the Flash version. Obviously, this works perfectly because it's been out there for 10 years. This is when it's going to fail on me, right? First name, I'll choose a male avatar. Hit continue. You know, there I am. Are you a client? I've never been a client. Continue. Are you in jail or prison? And so on and so forth. So this is a Flash box and would have trouble if somebody were to go in and try to run it on an iPad that didn't support it or for some other reason. All right, so that's why we're doing A2J5. Resume editing. Close. So all of these are tabs that let you get at various aspects of the program, create variables, include meta information about the thing because we want the authors, the lawyers, to document their work. My ideal situation is every time they do a page that makes a decision, like, you know, if income less than 20,000, they would stick a statutory link in there or a reg, you know, in there, so that we could do in the future automated auditing of it. You know, if the law changes, you know, then it would be able to see, it would be able to like, you can imagine sort of a spider that walks through all the guided interviews, finds regs that have changed and then flag them for somebody to do some looking at. But that's dream thinking at this point. But at least we've got the infrastructure in place for that possibility in the future. All right. We've got a we've got a pretty good map. It's essentially a flow chart of the whole thing. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You know, with basically a box for every question. And in the best of situations, this is almost a legal process map. Right? It's not technically, right? Because it's basically a series of questions that shows the branches that, like, you know, if you qualify, go one way. If you don't qualify, it goes another way, and it can show that. But it's a legal process map, but from the user's viewpoint, at least as captured by the author of the guided interview, who walks the person through. This is an area of the program that I know we can do way more cool things with. But it's sort of in the area of UX design, and I'm not sure yet how we can make this tremendously valuable to lawyers, because they tend not to think this way, although they love the idea of seeing the whole thing laid out in a giant chart. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, let's hit fit there so you can see the whole thing in this case. So this is actually a pretty big interview. All right.
John, is that just another option of how to see it?
Yes.
A view
yeah, these are all the questions. These are all the questions that are in the interview, and I can click on any one of those and pop up that question and edit it. Yeah. close that up. So this tab is basically, I can individually edit any question, but one of the things we found with A2J4 is sometimes there's a thing where people will say, well, I need to change the name of a variable, or I need to change the wording that I did, and it appears in 17 different questions or something like that. So we give them a tab here that basically is all the text in the entire interview. And I can collapse that down, squeeze it up a little bit. There we go. When my JavaScript is running slow, and pop open individual parts and work on it. But the point is, I can now use Control F to like search for phrases or something like that, and quickly sort of act at a high level as though the whole interview is one long document, instead of having to just go in and open a page and close a page and open a page and close a page. Part of describing this to you is that you're not familiar with how the old way was and how the new way fixes that, or something like that. So in the old way, there was no way to do that, to look at the entire thing. I had to edit individual pages if I wanted to change anything. I couldn't look at all the pages all at once. All right. To me, the secret sauce of this project is the logic. So we didn't want lawyers to have to be programmers, but we had to teach them or give them the capability to be programmers, and that's a small p programmer, because we want them to be able to make decisions inside the code or inside the interview. If you make less than $20,000, then you're eligible. Go this way, keep going. If you make more than $20,000, you're not eligible. Branch out to another web page where you can go find pro bono help or something like that. The ability to ask the person what their name is, pull that name in as a variable, and then feed it back to them. Well, John, it looks like you're eligible, and to create a more friendly user interfaces with that. The ability to do calculations, your income times 200% of the poverty level, less than or equal to it, things like that. So I won't show you how we did it in the old one, but in the new one, basically there's little logic boxes that get executed before or after the page loads. So the author can say, well, I want to set up a bunch of variables before the page loads, and then when they exit this page, I want to do a whole bunch of other little things. And that's what all of this, whoopsie daisy. And that's what all this is all the logic that's inside of this particular interview. Now this happens to be a relatively complicated interview because it has a lot of logic. Most interviews are fairly simple. A couple of things, maybe one or two decisions, collect some information, go produce a form, I'm done. But I picked one that's got a lot of information in it for illustration purposes. We're running into, in creating a more sophisticated logic machine behind the scenes, we have to convert the logic that was in the old interviews. And so this was an imported interview that still has some essentially just syntax errors in it. And in some cases, Sam will work magic and automatically fix those for those people. And in other cases, we're going to have to bug the author and say, you have to take a look at these red boxes here because we can't make an automated decision on how to fix these. So there's a small conversion step for the 800 interviews that are out there. At least a sort of an audit to make sure there's no errors and things like that. This is just, this is the pain of having a successful piece of software when you decide that you need to have more capability and you move into a new version. All right? So, who's a programmer? One or two? Okay, so this is not programming, right? I mean, if-then statements, conditionals, variable setting. It's not like we're giving them JavaScript or something like that. Although we consider
it. Minimum requirement.
Yeah, you're right. It's not. It meets some minimum requirements. But what I'm saying is, I'm afraid of what people will do if we give them too much power in there, because the original goal for A2J was to deal with simple forms, not mergers and acquisitions or something like that. And I continue to believe that there's plenty of work to be done in automating the thousands, tens of thousands of relatively simple court processes that yet befuddle self-represented litigants. But people saw the capability of this and said, wow, we could do some really cool stuff with this. And so I've actually got sort of like two groups of users that pull us in two different directions. So the first group of users are the advanced ones who have become very smart with this and have tried to make it do things that we never really designed it for, with hundreds of questions, maybe even 1,000 questions or something like that. The second group, however, and I'm going to have to, I'll come to that in just a second. Oops. The second group is law students. So the other problem with that hockey stick not being able to go up higher is there aren't enough lawyers and there isn't enough grant money to pay them to automate the forms faster. As cool as this is and people like it, they still have to be paid to do that work. And so we got this crazy idea that said, well, what if we could work with law schools where they would teach their students about A2J author and integrate it as a project into a course, and then we would pair the student up with an SME, a subject matter expert, meaning the legal aid attorney, and they would automate the form. And that's what the A2J clinical project is. So, we had 6 pilot clinics at these schools. These are some of the student projects from the last year from Chicago, Kent. As you can see, they're all over the place in terms of geography and in terms of types of things going on. The students had to do a lot of work before they could automate a form because they're not practicing lawyers. They're not legal aid attorneys. They had to observe the self-represented litigants in a court. They had to write a scope document, which is to say they had to do legal research. They had to do a flow chart, and then they had to use the software to do the automation part. All right? So the big picture idea here is that Cali, which is a consortium of 200 law schools, will be able to get students 21st century practice skills with A2J author as the delivery mechanism, right? The law schools are going to get some portion of an experiential curriculum, and the legal aid is going to get help serving their constituents, and that's sort of where we're heading. We think this is starting to work out really good. The other wins are for unrepresented litigants. The more forms we automated, the more people can solve their own legal problems, especially if they can't get in the door for that free legal help. And I haven't even talked about the courts. Judges love us because the judges are constantly dealing with people who show up and they've filled out the form incorrectly, or they filled out the wrong form, or they're confused, and they say to the judge, well, what am I supposed to do? And the judge is not allowed to tell them what they're supposed to do because that's legal advice, or that's guiding them, and that's not their job, or that's not allowed. That's the fairest way to say it. So then the people get mad and screw the government, and they buy weapons and bad things happen.
Direct correlation.
That's right. There's a direct correlation from A2J to terrorism. That's right. A2J, fight terrorism.
Thank you for saving all of our lives.
You're welcome, young men. No, well, okay. So let's be more mundane. Tell a story. I was working. This is an old one with the Supreme Court justice in Idaho. They automated some forms. He looked at this. He said, "This is awesome. I love this. So let's automate everything in Idaho, or a whole bunch more." And they gave him a bid for how much it would cost to have somebody do it, and then they multiplied it by 3. And he's like, "Well, why do you multiply it by 3?" And he's like, "Well, there's 3 counties in Idaho. It's a small state, and each county uses different forms and different processes for these things." And he's like, "Well, why don't they all just use the same form?" This is the Supreme Court justice saying, "Well, they use the same form because you didn't tell them to use the same form." And he's like, "Oh, well, I'll just tell them they all have to use the same form." And it was 20 years of bureaucratic wrangling to have all the same forms accepted across the state. And in 1 second, the guy saw how much it would cost to do it if you automated, and it changed. And we've had that experience in a couple of other states as well, in Illinois and I think Michigan, or I don't know, where the courts take a look at this technology, realizes that it makes their job easier, makes people happy, saves money, and so Fantastic, right? I love the fact that it's both legal aid, which is outside the court, and it's the courts, which are sort of inside the system, both attacking the problem from sort of two different sides. You know, and I further love the fact that now we're going to rope the law schools into it and the clinics, you know, and there's some hope here. There's some hope that we can do some real damage to this problem. Sorry, I get excited. Oh yeah, I forgot about the last one. I get to work on the coolest project in my career. Yeah, perfect timing for that one to come up, right? So what about document assembly? Well, this is my little sort of foray into document assembly and why we think we can pull this off. And the first thing I did was I went and looked at all the looked deeply at HotDocs and all the other document assembly tools. And basically, they're almost all start with Word, and then they add on a whole bunch of capabilities inside Word. You do all your document assembly, the construction of your document to be assembled inside of Word using macros or VBA or other things. And I'm here to tell you that that's a trap. Right? Because as soon as you hitch your wagon to Word, you're stuck with their crappy file format that is incompatible and Windows only, and it's going to cause you endless grief. Right? And so in designing our document assembly capability, you know, we want to avoid some of those traps. So this is my sort of cut at this. You know, they're all implemented on top of that document assembly systems that are sold in the commercial market now are implemented on top of existing clause libraries or document stores. In other words, HotDocs isn't out there trying to sell themselves to a legal aid attorney or even to a solo. They're mostly going to big law firms or medium-sized law firms or insurance companies saying, you have 10,000 documents, you do 500,000 contracts a year. You know, certainly you don't want to bespoke write those things from scratch. You know, start from your giant store of documents, turn it into a clause library, stick a bunch of automated document assembly forms on top of it, and bada bing, you're saving millions of dollars, of which we get, you know, 10% of that or something like that. Totally cool, totally makes sense. But that's not what we're trying to do. So being aware that that's what they're designed to do, we don't want to design that capability into ours, right? Most bang for the buck. They basically aim themselves at large practice areas where there's a lot of that repetition and where there's a lot of verticality to it too. You know, mergers and acquisitions have 19 steps with fairly well-defined documents at each step, you know, and those things are process mapped out to death. At least the good firms would do that. We're more about one at a time, one-offs, because we're dealing with simple things, at least at first, right? The ecology of document assembly that's out there right now, it promotes extreme specialization, which is to say, you know, if they go to a big firm and sell them a document assembly tool, they don't then haul all 500 lawyers off and say, we're going to train you all in how to author document assembly templates. No, they pick 2 or 3 and they make them the document assembly expert. They're the, what is it? What did she call it this morning? They're the purple squirrels, you know, for the rest of the firm. You know, if anybody needs document assembly templates authoring, go to that guy. We're not doing that. We sort of want law students to be able to create these things. We want non-programmer types to be able to create these things, right? All of these are wedded to Microsoft Word because lawyers have always had lots of Word documents on their hard drives. Well, maybe we can break that marriage right now. And document assembly passes aimed at making the lawyers more efficient. You know, I used to charge $200 an hour, and it would take me an hour to write this will. Now I've got HotDocs. It takes me 10 minutes. I'll keep charging that $200 and go home early. That's not fair, but it's aimed at making lawyers able to produce more and hopefully then sustain their income for that. So if you take those things and shorten them out, let's look at it this way. You know, I'm saying that we're going to start from a clean slate. Legal aid does not have a giant document store or a clause library that I can get at, and I sort of don't want to spend a whole lot of time going out and getting it and thinking about how that might work. I don't want a huge meta project. I need to start doing this stuff right now. I want fast and dirty. I'm not talking about large practice, one at a time. Every lawyer to me is an author. The whole thing should be born on the web, and it's not about making lawyers more efficient, it's about making clients more efficient. It's It's a whole different way of thinking. You know, when you get to the point you say, now let's design a document assembly system in A2J author. So what we're about is this: simple forms, ladders, reports, lists. MVP stands for minimum viable product. I don't have to write the totality of document assembly or uberness. I just have to produce a nice document, you know, one letter, and then, you know, I have to do hello world and then add to that. You know, and that's fine. I'll iterate, you know, slowly. But if I've got a working system right away, I can like almost have something, you know, the first time I've got a document assembly system working, I know I can solve like a very small circle of problems, and I'll just sort of grow that circle. I'm going to basically, you know, and this is me maybe contentiously saying, look, it's basically mail merge and macros. How hard can that be, right? JavaScript editors, have you guys looked at JavaScript editors lately? My God, they're powerful. Things you can do inside of a browser, inside of an editor. Certainly with Google Docs being sort of the pinnacle of that, right? We need convertible formats because we got to turn things into RTF because people are going to want to download them and then maybe do some locally editing or PDF. And we want to basically do that either by JavaScript or by some sort of server-side scripting. And there are a lot of libraries, PHP libraries and other things that will serve that purpose. And plain language support, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is how it might look inside of A2J, and Sam's never seen this. So, you know, all we do is add another tab down here called clauses, and you click on that and you get a list of what's essentially variables that are clauses. And maybe it shows the variables that are inside that clause, and maybe it shows the functions that are inside that clause. Just sort of like a quick view. And you double click on that to pop it open, and you've got a JavaScript editor that lets you, you know, create documents, maybe only create paragraphs of documents. You know, let the author decide what the chunking is going to be. All right? So we give them some kind of a simple language. You know, variables get stuck inside of brackets. Macros are inside of some other delimiter, dollar signs in front or back. You know, and behind the scenes, we write the JavaScript that basically interprets that at assembly time into whatever today's date is, or pulls the variable information in the client last name. Once again, how hard can this be? Inside the logic box, we add some new primitives, you know, something that basically says insert clause, the name of the clause, you know, and then add a number. And that number is just a relative number that basically says that 1 is going to be at the top of the document, 2 is going to be after anything else that was previously inserted, you know, and 3 is after 3. Now, we could probably get more sophisticated than that. I'm going to need to think through some of these issues. But remember, the interface here is aimed at lawyers, not at programmers. I don't need to teach them, you know, Nicholas Worth, you know, the art of programming. I just need them to think in terms of sticking clauses that linearly will then get assembled, you know, into a working document. How hard can it be? Yeah, I think I already had that one there. So JavaScript editors, really quick. You know, I did some searching out there and realized just how powerful they were. But oh yeah, I wanted to get to the plain language thing. How much time have I got? I'm doing good. Good. So one of the problems we have is that even when lawyers who work with legal aid folks design guided interviews, they still can't help it. They're lawyers. They write legalese. I can't even think of a good example. It's too late.
Even like defendant and judgment and terms like jury.
Yeah, or so, you know, how many children do you have? Actually, that's a good one. But in this case, I'm talking about they use big words.
You're before there by the defendant play.
Yeah, excellent.
Even plaintiff. Like what does a plaintiff mean for someone with a 5th grade reading level?
Right, and our self-represented litigants or unrepresented people, so first of all, they may not have finished high school. They might be immigrants. English is a second language. They're definitely under stress because they're dealing with their own legal problem. All these things mitigate against them understanding this new space and this new language. And so there's a considerable effort in legal aid that if you write stuff that is client or URP or SRP facing, then better make it plain language. And one of their measures for plain language is Flesch-Kincaid, which basically says what reading level is the language in that. And there are JavaScript libraries, and actually it's just a little tiny formula that lets you calculate Flesch-Kincaid. So why not inside A2J, and I'm working on this, Sam, you know, that as people type, there's a little Flesch-Kincaid score that shows what the reading level is of the text that they're in. Now it probably doesn't work too well for like a sentence or two. You know, it can get you don't get true real world stuff. You know, so it might have to be something that's at the top level of the, you know, this whole interview is at a level. But I was thinking, you know, that we might even use like color combinations. As long as you're below 7th grade, it's green. When you get above 9th grade, it turns yellow. And if you get above 12th grade or something like that, it starts to turn red in the background. Can't see that too well with that. You know, and those would be good interface design things that would warn the lawyer author or the lawyer author law student that they need to plain language down their stuff, and that then that's a good thing. That our tool can be not just a powerful tool for automating, but also a powerful tool for solving the problem that it's designed to solve. You know, the plain language problem. I also thought, well, you know, if I can calculate things like Flesch-Kincaid, there's probably a whole bunch of other linguistic analysis stuff that I can think of. The one I just came up with for an example here is, you know, why not look for like the really complicated words? There's dictionaries of words, and who would know those words, and include a little scrolling sort of, you know, you're using some big words here. You might want to consider, you know, in other words, this would be more of a warning rather than a stop. You know, you might want to consider not using those words or changing those words or something like that. And of course, we'll probably have to have a button that says, turn off all these damn warnings, they're annoying me. All right. I don't remember why I had that screen there. Oh yeah, now I remember. All right, any questions?
The subject of language. If I say I'm an immigration attorney, so I do a form in English, how difficult would it be to basically transpose that form into Vietnamese and Spanish?
So the good news, even old A2J had the ability to do 3 or 4 or 5 different languages, but there was a cost to it because of technical issues. For Flash, when you wanted to do languages and other character sets, you had to, I'm going to probably say this wrong, Sam. You had to import not the language file, the character file for that, and it made the download a lot bigger. All right, so I mean, we got it working, but there was all sorts of background technical issues. Now, because we're inside the browser, we can piggyback on the browser's ability to do multiple languages without the overhead of downloading more stuff, and so we're going to be able to deal with that issue in a lot easier way. Plus, Sam, in his brilliance, wrote the software in such a way that the Chrome, which is to say the buttons like back, next, and something like that, nothing that the author put in, you know, but only things that our software presents as words, as a text file that we could hand to somebody and say, if you translate this into any other language, then we can programmatically load that and change the language of the Chrome so that the user can understand what the buttons mean. Now, that doesn't solve the problem of the interview itself not being in Vietnamese or Mandarin or something like that. And that's hard work. You know, they would have to, you know, translate each and every bit of the things that are not in English and run that as a separate interview. All right? But that's a long way of saying we're aware of the problem and working on it. All right.
I had a few questions.
Sure.
So you're hoping, I mean, you started with students working on these, but you're hoping that attorneys will also create forms?
Oh, we already have attorneys working on them, legal aid attorneys. And now we're hoping that we can also get students to working on them. And we do have students working on that.
So in one semester, how many forms are usually generated? Like 1 or 2?
Oh, in one semester, one student, one form, because they have to learn the software. But remember, that was with the old version where they also had to learn hot docs. And you know, we're hoping we can, you know, make them more efficient and be able to code things faster.
And once they're created, then what? Like, I'm thinking about the updating process when rules and regs change a little or slightly.
So under the current model, since they're working with an existing legal aid organization, they basically hand over the project to legal aid, and if it's not quite finished, hopefully then they can finish it, and they take responsibility for it by posting it on their website.
And they
so
can
updates-
maintain it,
Sorry?
and they can maintain
And
it.
then they would maintain it as well, right?
Do they maintain it?
They do.
They have to.
Like, we first started with Illinois, because Chicago is in Illinois. We work with Illinois Legal Aid Online, and they have over 70 forms, and about 6 to 10 of them were started with our students. And they have a full-time staff member and 1 or 2 part-time that maintain forms as a full-time. So each statewide website has someone who is maintaining all the forms.
I assume if the form drifts out of date or becomes dysfunctional,
They pull
it's
it.
in their interest
Yeah,
to
so
fix it.
for
It
example.
doesn't work for them,
Right.
have it no longer work.
And they're the ones who are responsible on the national server for any problems, it breaks, something changes, they own it. Once our student makes it, we turn it over and they own it. But we did an expungement for Cleveland, for like Ohio, and by the time it got through our semester-long process, reviewed by the legal aid, the law changed. And so our student project was useless at that point, but the legal aid then pulled it off and didn't use it.
Damn that law. So, but it's almost in a whole session in itself to talk about what happens when there's like 100,000 of these things out there, and how do you keep that up to date? And I'm fascinated by the problem space that represents, and I've got lots of ideas. But first we sort of first we want to see if the bear dances, then we'll teach him the Roomba later. So the last thing here is to talk about is mobile, and all I want to do is show you some mobile designs and how we're going to try to tackle that. So the desktop version looks like that. The mobile version would have to be obviously much smaller, right? I'm going to skip through to some of these things just to sort of pull out some highlights. So on the desktop version, there's a pull down that lets you go back to any previous question that you had answered. On the mobile version, same sort of thing. You thumb down from the top. Here's all the steps. Maybe you tap on a step and it expands into the question that were there. The pink ones in this example are questions you have not visited yet. The green ones are the ones you have visited. So that's not so bad, right? So on the ones where there's text, especially when there's a lot of text, we have this thing. I hate this in terms of if you're a user interface designer, you would hate this too. Is that there's a scroll bar in the middle of the screen, right? And so we've tried to deal with it by saying to authors, look, if you have that much text, do 2 pages, right? So there's no scroll bar. Because it might be that people will see that, not see the scroll bar, and then forget to scroll to read the rest of it. But in the mobile, well, maybe there's a way to solve that, right? Where you basically break it up into multiple screens. You use the little dots to show you're 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3. And you use little thumb swipes to go back and forth on that sort of thing. That would be a nice solution. The other option is, you do what a lot of mobile apps do, Twitter, Facebook, and things like that. You just have infinite scrolling, that sort of chops off at wherever the interface design wants you to do that. This is actually causing me pain to try to figure out which is the best way, because one model is sort of the ebook model, right? Where you're reading and you swipe this way, page, 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 and the other one is sort of the email or the Twitter model where you swipe to scroll all the way. And I just can't decide which one is better. Who votes for the ebook model? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who votes for the Twitter infinite scroll model? 1, 2. Man, you guys are no help. You see what I'm saying? Because I read lots. I read books on my phone all the time, and I obviously use it for Twitter and things like that. So I sort of don't care. Maybe it doesn't matter, right? All right. Our big thing is is that little guy that tells things. So here's another one that I ran into in designing this. Is on the desktop version, you have great precision with a mouse to put things into like little text boxes and then type, right? But on a mobile device, when you have more than one text box, that means you have to tap into the text box. The keyboard comes up and then you can type your information in, but it hides a third of the screen. And if you want to go to the next text box, you might have to scroll up a little bit, tap into that. You see what I'm saying? There's actually a lot of little micro steps that happen on the interface when you have multiple text boxes on the screen. So my idea for the solution was, when the guided interview has multiple text boxes in the desktop version, on the mobile version you would instead break them up into 3 screens. Again, doing that, 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, so that you never have the problem of the keyboard coming up and hiding the bottom one. You never have the problem of which one am I typing in, or I have to tap on something to set focus, and I just use the thumb swipe to go to the next one, right? There's a lot of situations where there's multiple radio buttons. This is my solution, but I don't like it. Not this one, but because actually this one doesn't work, because that's the size of your finger, right? And your fingers are fat, and they might go for this and slightly miss and hit the wrong one. So we have to solve the fat finger problem, and the solution is to break multiple radio boxes into individual screens. So since they're all basically yes, no, you basically turn them into, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens of yes, no questions. Is this your foreclosure? Is this an eviction? Is this a divorce? Is this a parking ticket? Tap yes, tap no. As soon as you hit yes, because it's a radio button, you're done, and you can skip to the end. And you can always swipe back and forth quickly. I don't think people mind moving around a lot on their phones, because they do that all the time with other interfaces. Anyhow, I'm not going to go through all the rest of these, because that's because I'm running out of time, because I want to get sort of to the end and say, mobile has some unique challenges. I told you about the fat finger one. We have the problem that people are not going to, or there is no existing app that I know of where people fill out 200 question forms on their mobile device. So I've got nothing out there to say, well, how did they do it? And but there are lots of apps out there where people do something for 30 seconds and then go away and do something else, and then come back and do it for 30 seconds, and they do that over hours. And the answer is like Angry Birds, right? You sit there, you play Angry Birds for a few minutes, and then you go away, and then you come back and you play Angry Birds for a few minutes and stuff like that. So our model is more of a sort of a game that you play for a while, and it keeps your progress, it keeps up to date with your progress, so that you can always return to continue with the game, or in this case with the form you're filling out, at any time. And that presents security problems, right? So we're storing their legal information on the phone, or are we squirting it off to the cloud every time they do it? Because we don't want them to say, oh, sorry, we lost your place. You have to go back to the beginning and do this. The thing has to be interruptible. It has to be aesthetic. It has to be automatic. So all I'm saying is there's a lot of challenges to solve on the mobile design. All right, that's me skipping all the way to the end. That's my talk. If you have any questions or want to learn more about it, I'm happy to talk to you at any time about this. Go ahead.
Do you have any provisions for typing from the end of one interview into another interview?
Oh, great. So that's the type of question that will lead to many more sessions here. Because you remember I said there's no clause libraries, and I don't want to build clause libraries. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that, as this ecosystem gets bigger, you can imagine building capabilities that make the ecosystem more efficient. Why not have shared libraries of clauses that the authors can share so not everybody has to come up with the legal language for the documents. Why not have, like you say, if you have a problem with giant forms, why not just cut the forms down into smaller forms, right? So instead of there being 7 steps, it's basically 7 guided interviews, just each one is a step in that thing. And then people can plug and play the steps together. So I've had those thoughts. and tried to keep them in mind when we're doing design work, but I don't yet know what that would mean in a real world ecosystem.
They do that kind of on a one-to-one basis now in the old software, so they're up on the server. On the national server, you can pull down somebody else's files and kind of use those, so you don't have to start from scratch. Like, one of our students at the University of Miami, they didn't have a disclaimer for like, we're not giving you legal advice, this doesn't form an attorney-client relationship, and Illinois has a really great one that they've used on their 70 forms. So they pulled that language and changed it to say Florida, and you're not forming blah 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 Florida stuff. So they are using questions and starting with forms and stuff like that now.
Right, we'll never get to the world where, the same forms are used across all the states. Although there are some collections, there are federal level things that might...
Identity theft right now is a big federal level. A2J got in there.
Right, somebody got a grant to do a bunch of identity theft related forms, and I think they did it for like one state, or they did and put it out there and said, well, anybody else who wants to also do identity theft forms, which is a hot topic, can start with theirs and just make changes for whatever your local situation is.
Well, I know CUNY has a citizenship project, and they probably could use this to do a lot of the interviewing stuff they do.
Yeah, there's a ton of this being used at the New York courts with the family court and in
CUNY's one of our A2J partners, to our A2J client.
Yeah,
partner.
Jonelle?
No.
No,
Joe Rosenberg.
Joe Rosenberg, right?
But they have Pro Bono does an immigration citizenship works.
Let's go to citizenship now.
Well, they have the Pro Bono Citizenship Works program uses an A2J, and it has it in Vietnamese and Cantonese, I believe.
Sure.
Do you also can the syntax? I think that what you've done also is like kind of create a syntax like describing modeling law, because you kind of like basically it's. Can you like actually use it to like compare like how different laws work and jurisdictions? It's because you just modeled it.
So not yet,
Yeah.
but you're right. These are sort of capturing how the law is enacted in XML,
Right.
and that's almost structured data. The next step is, can we learn something from a corpus of these things? And I'm fascinated by that question, but I haven't had time to explore it.
Maybe that'll be our next grant.
Yeah. Ben? Oh, were you raising your hand?
No. Just because you're interested in the way you just in the document assembly part of it, there's a ton of work going on around, and I hate to even mention it, Markdown. I talk to these youngsters who are all about Markdown. We all just use Markdown.
I know.
But the interesting thing is there is a lot of good work going on around editors for Markdown, displayers for Markdown.
Yeah, mark it up, right?
What's that?
Is it called Mark It Up? There's a really
There are a
cool...
bunch of them, but the multi-markdown composer, and there's a thing called Marked, which you might want to take a look at on the Mac, just because it displays a ton of useful statistics about the document. So it might feed into your ideas about making the documents more useful. And they go through a lot of different ways to display useful information about the documents you are creating.
Neat. So what was the name of that?
Marked, M-A-R-K-E-D. It's a previewer / editing helper for Markdown text. It's written by Brett Terpstra, I believe, is the guy who wrote it. I'll send you a note about it. It's
cool.
It's just got lots of interesting stuff that might play into some of your interface ideas.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's get the heck out of here, huh? Thanks.
My fifth session today, and I'm done.
You need to check on your Idaho school before you work on it.
What do you think? I thought it was... Okay, I might have gotten Idaho mixed up with Delaware. Delaware is 3 counties. Yeah. But it was the Idaho judge who made that, who we had that meeting with. So maybe it was the fact that they had